As you can see by this young fella's face, he's a little concerned about life in general. And you know, you would be too if you were he and you had to go to church 5 days a week and hear about people going to hell if they didn't accept Jesus. So I figured, no, that's not a good opportunity for me. I don't like that. But fortunately, I had a mother who was a real lesson to me on how one should live one's life. She's the lovely lady on the left. That's Alice Mildred. And Alice Mildred, she was pretty sure about what was right and what was wrong with life, and what was right and what was wrong with her son. She was in charge. So when I came home and said, Mom, I'm wearing knickers, and none of the boys were wearing knickers, and Miss Lawrence said maybe I could wear something else, she threw her fox. That's her one fox she got. That was her shorthand for a fur coat she was supposed to get. And she threw that around her neck and said, we're going to see Mrs. Lawrence. So we went down to see Mrs. Lawrence, and she said to Mrs. Lawrence a lot of things probably, but all I remember is she said, Mrs. Lawrence, you teach him, I'll dress him. So, you know, that's the kind of mom I had, and so I've tried to live up to that, but I can't quite do it. My daddy, of course, he was a fashion plate. He was a banker, and he was not wildly happy about having an artistic son. He might just well have had an autistic son, but he didn't. And so when I was lifting my weights, which I had created because we couldn't afford to buy anything, I filled cement into 2-gallon tin cans and put a broken broom handle between them and made myself a pair of weights. And he looked at them and he looked at me and he thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever seen in his life. I never picked up weights again for 65 years. Are you all sympathetic with me now? But that was the whole point of that story. I was a member of a big family, the Lotzer family. Sophie Lotzer, a nice German lady, and her friend Friedrich. They moved from Germany to Long Island, and they had a lot of kids. And the kids had a lot of kids. So this is, every year we had the Lotzers would come together and we would have great fun. One particular, let me see if I got this thing, whatever it is. Now where is Ted? Yeah, there's Ted. Now Ted had a great sense of humor. So what he arranged for is a donkey costume for he and his other uncle, my other uncles, to wear. And Ted took the back end of the donkey and he dumped out turnips at the back end. We knew what he meant, but we did have fun, and I really miss all of that camaraderie that you get from a family. But my big escape from fundamentalism was going into the Navy. I joined the Navy at 17, and you can see I'm very happy. Actually, I look scared shitless, but I was both of those things, happy and scared. And I never forget the one afternoon, one of my buddies came up to me and said, hey, Jers, we're going out to see some strippers. Why don't you join us? And I said, oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. It's against my religion. He said, nonsense, Jers, you're an artist. This is art we're going to. Well, I didn't quite buy into that. But I did buy into art, and I did do a lot of art in the Navy. This says you're going to leave us now, something like that. Anyhow, but so cartooning, which became my escape from fundamentalism, became my escape from all my very liberal, horny cellmates, classmates, shipmates. So I did that. I did quite a few. In the future, we'll use potato slicer. So my friends all liked that, and I enjoyed that. But I decided that there was probably a better way to make a living. And when I got out of the Navy, I used my art to join Good News Productions. And I am here working on a film you may have heard of. It was called The Blob. And The Blob, which we all called at Good News Productions, we called it the Cruise of the Carnivorous Ooze, which we thought was actually more accurate than The Blob. But we had a great time making the religious films, And here you see the ad for the Blob, which really states it. It was, of course, Steve McQueen's first major feature film, so it was a big deal for him. And it was my first feature art directing, so it was a big deal for me. And we sold it to Paramount Pictures, I think, for something like $300,000, and they made about $3 million in the first year. It still is being sold, and if you're lucky, you can go to Phoenixville on any autumn day if you check the theater, the Colonial Theater website, and see the Blob. Every year the Blob is run. They have the Blob Fest, and you can actually see the glob that made the Blob crawl out the window to attack all the people in the theater. So that was really exciting. And here is Steve McQueen coming through at the police station reporting that they have seen this guy who has just been eaten up by a blob, and what are we going to do about it? And if you know the movie, what they did about it is they put him in an airplane, they got the blob into an airplane, took him up north, and froze him to death. So it all ended well, and that's why everybody loves it. So that led to many opportunities for me, one of which was going to South America. I went to South America and did a film in the Amazon jungle. It was the story of Commander George Diet, who went to the jungle of Brazil, but Brazil wanted to develop the film, so the Warner Brothers said, we're not letting those Brazilians touch our film. So we shot it in Amazon, and you know, you've seen one native, you've seen them all, I suppose. So they didn't care. But we did do additional show. Let's see if I have thinking on that. Well, I don't have an image, but this is the equipment we had. We took this into the jungle. This crab dolly, no, it's not even a crab dolly. Yeah, maybe it is, I don't know. Anyhow, it's a dolly to move the camera, and that giant camera. And I loved watching the young Indians carry the equipment up. See that camera? That camera weighs about 150 pounds. Well, this little Indian fella, he didn't know that, and he didn't know he wasn't supposed to carry it. Somebody said, pick it up, he picked it up. And he carried that on his shoulder up the hill to the top of the hill. But that wasn't the most exciting thing about these wonderful people. They had a game they called, I forget what they called it, but they shot arrows at one another. Now, they did take the arrowhead off, but you still have a 6-foot arrow that they're shooting at one another, and the only thing that protects them is their single cloak that they wear, the coat that they wear. They swing it around, and if they swing it around at the right time, the arrow is deflected by the cloth. If they swing it at the wrong time, or it's aimed higher, as one kid was, the arrow hit him in the head and made a hole in his head, and the patron just poured something in it and said, you know, go keep playing. And they did. One of the fun moments for me, I'm not a great swimmer, I'm a decent swimmer, but I'm not a great swimmer, and this fellow here was one of our production managers because he spoke fluent Spanish. The rest of us did not. But we needed the director needed another man in the canoe, and you can sort of see the canoe here somewhere. It is a portable, flexible, foldable canoe. Not the kind of canoe one should really put in heavy rapids in the jungle. But that's what we did, because that was what the movie said we should do. So we put this little thing in the rapids, and as it started going down the rapids, it dipped in underneath the water and collected water until it was full of water, and my poor friend Jim, who could not swim, realized that he was not going to be able to go any further because the canoe with water was going to go down all by itself, which it did, never to be seen again. But so I drove in the water, and I actually got Jim by his arms, I guess, I don't know, and dragged him ashore. So I was a temporary hero, but I sure didn't think it was a good idea to use flexible, foldable canoes on an Amazon river. That did lead me to where I really began my career, which was at NBC. This is 1963. NBC, the show is called Incident on Wilson Street, and it's not the show that got me an Emmy, but it's the show I have a picture of. And that's me, the fellow balding. You see, I never had any hair. I didn't have any hair. I must have had no hair after I was 12. But anyhow, there I am, and God bless him, there is my cameraman, who is an absolute sweetheart, Joe Vidala. Joe was such a wonderful human being. He carried this terrible camera. It was not designed to be carried. It was designed to be put on a tripod. And I'll never remember the first day when Joe came on this location. He said, Bill, where do you want me to put the tripod? I said, in the trunk, Joe. He said, ha, ha, ha. I said, no, in the trunk, Joe. We're not going to use tripods in the show. You're going to hold it in your hand, and we're going to move with the people because they're not accommodating us, we are accommodating them. Well, this was pretty radical in 1960. Joe loved it. He was fabulous. As you can see, I really had a wonderful life in spite of my continued fear of hell or fear of life in general. You know, sometimes it isn't what you get rid of in life, it's what you don't allow to take over in your life, and that's, I think, what I've learned to do. This was the Manhattan Battleground. I got an Emmy for that, so that was nice. And here is a wonderful social worker, Dan Murrow, who is the star of my film. And he is on 111th Street just cheering on one of the kids on 111th Street. Anyhow, Dan has this party for these kids because he's going away. He's leaving after 5 years of being on 111th Street. And I realized that all the kids are really broken up. They're crying, he's leaving, and he was their rock. And so I went over and I put my arm around one, I talked to one, and Joe came home to me and said, Jersey, we're making a film here. Would you stop hugging the kids? So I did. But people are really what really excite me. And this is a shot of the opening discussion at Lutheran Film Associates. They have asked me to do a film on racial tension. And you can see my reaction here. And that's because I have just told them when they asked, no, I don't write scripts. No, you will not know how the film will turn out until it turns out. And they just thought that was the weirdest thing they'd ever heard. But God bless them, they went ahead with it. They let me make the film. And I found a minister on the right here, whoops, sorry, who was in Omaha at a big Lutheran, all-white Lutheran church. First time he'd been in an all-white Lutheran church. He'd been in an integrated church in Orange, New Jersey, but this was his first all-white church. And I decided that was where I could probably find a story, because I did not want to go to the South where all those nasty people were, or the urban situation where all that mess was. I wanted this film to represent Americans' problem with race. So I picked Omaha. I figured that's about as middle class, middle culture as you can find, and found Bill Youngdahl, who was very happy to have us come make the film. But he said, why are you going to make a film here? I said, Bill, you're an all-white minister in an all-white church, and you have Negroes, they were called then. You have Negroes in your community, and you probably don't even know them, and you knew them well in Orange. He said, yeah. Well, he said, we'll reach out to them. Well, I said, well, I just happened to have found someone, the man on the left, Ernie Chambers, who was a barber on the east side of Omaha. You might want to talk to him. Well, I didn't tell Bill, so I suppose that was unfair, that Mr. Chambers, the man on the left, is a graduate of Creighton Law School. And he was cutting hair because he wanted to be a part of the community, not because he needed to cut hair. And that's probably the most powerful sequence I've ever shot in my life, was when Ernie started to berate Bill for what white people have done to black people. Bill had wonderful responses. He was a thoughtful, caring human being. But I edited the sequence and I cut out all of Bill's nice responses. And then I showed it to him. I said, Bill, I know this is not what quote unquote literally happened. As my students know, I have two letters replying to filmmaking. One is the small t, which is the truth, and the big T, which is the small t, this is the fact, and the big T, which is the truth. So I said the small t was you had a lot of good answers. The big T, the truth, was you had no answer. And that's the way I cut it. And he said, you're right. So it stayed the way I cut it, and I appreciate Bill Youngdahl forever and the church. because the film ends up with the congregation kicking him out of the church. Here I am filming the handheld camera, one sound person, Barbara, and one assistant. And we had to change magazines. You could only shoot for 10 minutes. You know, now you can shoot for 15 hours, I think, without changing anything. But then you could only shoot for 10 or 11 minutes. And then you had to change magazines, and you had to pray that you stopped and started at the right time. And Ernie is still, I think, pretty unhappy with the way white people were. But this was the big moment for the film, for me. Because this was not the moment when Ernie Chambers is berating Bill Youngdahl, when the black man is berating the white man. This was the moment in which the white man had to face up to what he had unknowingly participated in. He said, Ray, who was the guy on the right, he said in the beginning, he said on film, he said, why are we going to get involved with Negroes? I mean, that's important, but there are old people, there are people who are disadvantaged. You know, we shouldn't jump right into the most controversial thing we can do. At the end, he was saying, where was the church when Hitler was doing to the Jews what he did to the Jews? And Ernie became a real stalwart, and many of the members did, but Bill Youngdahl was kicked out of the church. And I suppose to no one's surprise, he left Omaha and went to Berkeley. Anyhow, we got great reviews, got Academy Award nominations, all kinds of good things. And that, I suppose, led to, because I had my religious background, and because I really was not sympathetic, but empathetic with people whose religious faith was so powerful to them. So I was asked by Washington Television to do a film on American fundamentalism. And this was one of the posters for the film. And it all came rooted in my background as a fundamentalist student at Houghton and Wheaton College. This is me right there. And I joined a quartet because I love singing, still love singing, wish I could sing better. But I love singing, I love being part of a group. So we traveled around, we sang songs and about Jesus and about salvation, and we were very popular, and it was fun. So let's see what comes next. That didn't exactly lead to this, but in a way it did. I went from one mob trying to control people to another mob trying to control people. Well, that's maybe a little unfair, so maybe we should go further. But what is wonderful about making documentary films is that you have the opportunity to meet the most fascinating, most extraordinary, most abominable, but occasionally most delightful human beings you'll ever want to meet. This is me filming one of the mob members cutting up a chicken. And it reminded me of one of the mob's stories about why he had to cut up the body of a man they threw in the river. He said, we had to cut him up because we owed him too much money, we couldn't pay him. That was Billy Beatty of the West Side Westies. And he said, you know, and if you can't pay something, you have to get rid of him. You know that, you understand that. He said, but the problem was we didn't puncture the lungs. So his torso floated up the river and they could identify him. But he said, you have to understand, we was in the loining stage. I said, yeah, I understand. Then there was Dory Shapiro. Dory Shapiro's father was a very famous Jewish gangster, very famous mob, New York mob. And Dory had a lot of wonderful stories to tell me. But one time I challenged her, I said, Dory, you know your father killed a lot of people. And she said, yes, but only for good reason. And then she also told me by the time Daddy was going to get her operation on her breasts because he thought they were too big. And she says to me, I said to Daddy, I like my tits the way they are and I'm not going to do it. And he said, Dory, I got to deal with the surgeon. And so we go from one mob to another mob. And this was probably one of the hardest films I ever worked on in my life. It was the rise and fall of Jim Crow. And we met this hostile, hating human being who, as you see, says, a brain is a terrible thing to waste. That's why niggers don't have any. And I struggled with this sequence. Do I really give voice to that kind of human being? So I talked to my African American friends. I said, you gotta make this decision for me. I can't make the decision. They said, you gotta put that in. Because that's the kind of person. It's often hidden. You often can't see it. But that's the attitude that permeates much of our society. Remember, this was many, many years ago. But if we look around what's happening today, I think we can see not all is well in America as far regarding race. This was a fun time. Maya Angelou, it was fun to be with. She was, like me, a wise ass, but I wouldn't have called her that. But she was really hard on her people, on her friends. I was in there and we were doing a film, we were doing a shoot with her, and her best friend, quote unquote, came into the room and she tore into her like she was some maid. It just happened to be a temporary because the good one was not available. But I didn't want to say it. I thought, you know what? You have to accept, and somebody taught me this once, you have to accept what's good that people can deliver and not get damaged by the evil they might do. I think we can apply it to politics today. But she was a wonderful interview. She's written some wonderful books. I know why the caged bird can't sing. I know why the caged bird can't sing, or I know why the caged bird sings. No, I know why the caged bird sings. Wonderful book. And then there were people like Norman Mailer. You know, you can't miss with Norman. You've got to do a film about Norman Mailer in a lifetime, but of course he's gone, so you can't. But Norman told us so many wonderful stories. Well, one we're laughing at now might be the story about, and not the story, his expressing his attitude toward football players. Now he says, any man that puts his hands under the bottom of another man and reaches for a ball, what kind of a person is that? and he had even worse ones than that. But I remember when his wife came in, Nora Church came in while we were interviewing him. And I said, Norman, that's a beautiful lady you got. I hope you don't get rid of her. He said, I don't get rid of any woman anymore. I can't walk. And it was true, he couldn't. But he was a funny guy, he was a bright guy, he was a talented guy also. He was a guy who had qualities I did not admire, like this guy. Now, my friend said to me, that you're really not going to interview Richard Nixon, are you? I said, you bet. I really want to know why people like that in my world think what they think, do what they do. You, I understand, you're like me, but he's not. And so I really loved talking with him. And I did not, as a man who paid $1 million for an interview, I didn't pay anything for Richard Nixon. And the New York Times, very kindly to me, although I don't think it was an act of kindness, the New York Times said Bill Jersey did not get paid anything for his interview with Nixon, and he made Nixon look more presidential. Now, of course, that made my radical friends vomit. I said, no, that's my job. My job, as I see it, is to see what's best in people, not what's worst. Fortunately, most people will show their worst. So you don't have to hang them by their own petard. They'll hang themselves. So I appreciate that. But Richard was a very interesting guy. He would not look me in the eye. You can see where he's looking. He's looking over my head. And when I sat cheek to jowl with him, he looked down at my fly, I thought, and I thought, gee, maybe my flaw's open. But no, he just would not look me in the eye. And I think that, as far as I'm concerned, that says all you need to know about Richard. He did have a wonderful story. He had a story at Camp David. He took Baryshnikov. Was it Baryshnikov? No, he's a dancer. Brezhnev, thank you. He took Brezhnev for a ride in a big Lincoln. And at the end of the ride, Brezhnev was going around corners. He says, he was going around corners so fast, I wouldn't even go on a straight road that fast. And then he said, but at the end he said to me, that car drives very nicely. And then he giggled at me, and Richard Nixon giggled at me and said, that's the price of diplomacy. Home for the Head Hippie. This was Jersey's hippie years, and I am actually going up, I'm doing a film for Ford Motor Company. And when I appeared looking like this on the location with the Ford Motor Company folks, who did not look like this at all, I don't know what they thought. They never said anything. But finally, when we showed them the film, one guy said, well, it's not my kind of film. And he was probably right, it probably wasn't. Then the other guy, who was not a happy client, was, although they did run the film, the other guy who was not a happy client is this fellow right here. His name is Werner Erhard. And he created the S program, the Erhard Seminars Training. And he had the hundreds of people believing that he could show them the way to total liberation. And I must say, I think a lot of people were helped by somebody who took over their life for them. Now, that's not my trip. When Werner said to me, Bill, you take the training, I won't charge you anything. I said, right. I said, Werner, I grew up a fundamentalist. I've been there, done that. Fortunately, he smiled. He even smiled one night when we went to dinner at his house. And he had given us tickets to see, what did we go see, Shirley? Evita. He had given us tickets to see Evita when Shirley and I and Werner, his wife, and about 6 others, we went to see Evita. And you probably know that in the play Evita, she stands up on the balcony and reaches her arms out to embrace the world that she wants to control. So at the dinner, I'm saying to Werner, you know, that I really appreciate took us to Evita. And you know, frankly, Werner, I could see you up there doing that. I think that these kinds of people are so often kowtowed to, or so often have, you know, obsequious little suckers hanging around them, that when somebody really says something that's true, they're willing to listen to it. Except this guy. This was a film done for Jackie Gleason. It was called Jackie Gleason's World of Pets. That was one of his World of Pets. And there is Barbara and I with the one camera and one sound person. And we did, and the pet owners were just marvelous. We had this one woman her children had a pet tarantula. And so they brought the tarantula in for the shoot, and the tarantula walked up her arm, and she frowned and reached the arm back like she was going to put it in her mouth. And I said, what do you think? She said, oh, I think this is very nice. And then another guy told us about, another woman told us about having pet snails, and how the snails had crawled out of their cage and of their aquarium and on the floor, and she didn't know it. So she walked downstairs, she stepped on them. And she said, I said to myself, there goes Charlie. So we showed it to Gleason, and Gleason said, I'm not going to put my name on that show. They're much funnier than me. Sometimes it doesn't all work out that well. You see, sometimes you just don't get it right, or it goes on too long, or you wish you'd died. And I think I probably was feeling all of those things. Until I met Shirley, I was basically a manic depressive, and more depressive than manic. But you know, once you marry a German wife, she takes over your life, so you don't get this way anymore. She won't let me. She's tough. And what else helped me, of course, was that while the filmmaking was my profession, painting was always my passion. And I managed to do some painting. In fact, it was Shirley that got me started. See, that's you marry a German, that's how it worked. She got me started because we were up in Vermont having a pleasant time, but I was probably hanging around too much and doing nothing, which is what I don't like to do. And she said, you haven't painted, because I hadn't painted like for 25 years. I had saved my easel, which is a very interesting, odd thing. I'd saved my easel, but I hadn't painted for 25 years. So we're up in Vermont, and she says, why don't you go downtown to Willie's store? You can get a pad and some crayons or pastels or whatever, and start drawing. And I did. And then I started painting, and I've been painting ever since. And so Shirley, thank you. The smile on my face is because of you. But it all came back for what I had done in my fundamentalist school. You see, my fundamentalist college, and at meetings, fundamentalist church meetings. I would draw these pictures, and then up in the clouds, you can't see it here, up in the clouds in ultraviolet chalk, I would put Jesus. And so then when I turn the lights, my left hand is on a panel that controls the lights. I control all colored lights, and then I control the ultraviolet. And when I hit the ultraviolet light and Jesus appears in those clouds, I'll tell you, I could have converted Donald Trump. So I continue my work, and this is a wonderful teacher. This is one of my early paintings. You'll see on to the right the truck that I love, and there's the old car I love. He was a wonderful teacher, but the great teacher was Carl Steele. And Carl Steele taught me not only painting and drawing and color and form. Carl Steele taught me about the fundamentals, not of Christianity, which he was a little uncomfortable with, but the fundamentals of life. He said to me, Bill, do you know how to use a drill? I said, Carl, what do I want to drill for? I don't drill pictures, I paint pictures. He said, Bill, the more you know how to do, the less you need to rely on other people. Thank you, Carl. Also, when he went out to preach and do the drawings, because he did those chalk drawings just like I did, he told me he went out once, and a good brother came up to him and said, now, Brother Steele, you got to stop what you're doing because we have to call upon the Lord to bless upon our meeting tonight. And he said, Brother Smith, if I waited till now to call upon the Lord, I don't know sure he would hear me. And I thought, thank you, Brother Carl, you got it right. But at the same time, I was going up to Vermont and continuing to do my work. This is Evergreens and Maples, one of my favorite Vermont pictures. And this is one of my favorite Vermont families. And that was their building. And no, that was not their building. This is their building right here, which is all gone now. It all fell down. But they saw me painting, and I said to this little fellow, I said, you know what? I'll bet you can draw. He said, I don't think I can. I said to her, well, look, do you have any crayons and paper? She said, yeah, I do. I said, well, you bring them out, and then you two draw while I'm drawing, and let's see if we don't have a good time doing it. And they did have a good time doing it. And then their mom, whoops, where are we? Oh, there we are. Then Mom and Dad and the two older boys came out, and they watched, and oh no, here's Dad, sorry, there's Dad and Mom, and three boys came out, and I said, would you mind taking your picture, because I really want to remember you, not just the barns. And they were very happy to do that, and this is one of my absolute favorite pictures, because it represents who I am in relation to my work. I love being with people. Now that's not always so great, because some of the people you fall in love with are not so nice. But most of them are, and I try to represent in my work, I try to represent them. Not just what I can do with their building, but try in some way to embody the character of the people. And this was the painting that I did. And unfortunately, that barn, those two silos is gone, this barn is gone, and I think even this barn is gone, and only is left the house and the other side. So it saddens me to see that, but I'm glad I got it. This was one of my favorite Vermont paintings, because I'm beginning not to be tyrannized by nature, which I still occasionally am. That was a very full forest in the background. But I didn't want you to look at the forest, so I made that just what it is. Because what I wanted you to look at was New Tin Roofs. That's the title of the painting, New Tin Roofs. And that's always, my struggle is always to try and find, what is it that got me wanting to paint that painting? Was it the shape of the roof? Was it the shape of the shadow? Was it the shape of the mailboxes? This is a mailboxes on an old wagon wheel. So it spun around while the delivery man didn't have to get out and stick them in 8 different boxes. He just spun the wheel around and put them in. In this case, it was that tiny little strip of land. I call it the last green grass of summer. So it's always trying to find what the essence is. This to me was the shape of the hills. Being a male, of course, they look like breasts to me, but you know, what can I tell you? So I called it Mother Earth, and it is one of my favorites. This one is one of my wife's favorites, You can see I'm experimenting, which I always have and always will do. Galleries don't like you to experiment. They like you to do exactly the same thing you did last Tuesday. But I like trying to do things. I like trying to discover things. So one time I just got enamored with fruits and vegetables. And so here's my series in our local club in Berkeley of a bunch of fruits and vegetables. But back to film, always back to film. You know, you have to pay the rent somehow. And this time it was with my friend Sam Keane. He had written a book called Faces of the Enemy. And that really intrigued me because in reading the book I realized that his central thesis was not that enemies appear, but that we create them. We create enemies by making assumptions about who people are, by taking bits and pieces of their lives and make it the whole of their lives. So I was really excited. This film got very good reviews and got an Emmy from broadcast. But during that time, I became a member of a men's group, which was really, really important to me. I realized I had a lot of issues, as most men do, or at least most of the men I knew do. So I joined this men's group, and this is a sculpture made by one of our men's group. Would anybody care to name it? Say it loud.
Balls and buns.
Can't hear it. Did anybody?
Balls and buns.
Balls and buns? That's pretty good. That's good. It's balls and brains. So that was good. See, anyhow, that's our motto. Our name was SPERM, the Society for the Preservation and Enrichment of Righteous Manhood. There we are. You see where I get all my wisdom? I just check with God and say, God, are you still there? Because I still need you. This is the thing that really helped me. Older really can mean wiser. I read this article and I felt good for at least 10 minutes. Research is catching up with the notion that in some ways people grow smarter with age. You'd have to check with my wife, but I think in some ways I have grown smarter. I moved to Lambertville. That was smarter. But this is me, one of my early outings as a plein air painter in Lambertville in front of the Galleria restaurant. And this is my first plein air painting, thanks to Ty Hodanish, who is here and who I've praised frequently. I took one class with Ty. It was a 6-week class, and I only took 2 weeks because I said I thought I knew it. And he said, I think you do, and so he let me get away with not taking the last 3. What happened to those last 3 classes? Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyhow, so this is one of my first palette knife painting. It's all palette knife. The sky was first painted alizarin crimson. Then the sky was added with ultramarine blue and cobalt blue. This down below was all orange, cadmium orange, painted over with light green, viridian. And that gives it a kind of vitality. You don't quite see it in the photograph, but you see it in the real thing. So I submitted it to Phillips Mill. I got accepted at Phillips Mill. I got an award at Phillips Mill. And I sold it to Gratz Gallery, and I thought, man, this is the place to be. That was easy. I mean, no, you know, I'm not diminishing your talent, Ty, but I did do something. Well, it turns out that wasn't true at all. That getting into Phillips Mill is not that easy. That selling films to galleries is not that easy. But we keep doing it anyhow because of our love. In fact, what I loved most about Lambertville is the thing most people hate most about when they come from California. Remember this? We came from Berkeley, California. And when it snowed that first winter, I was happy. I'm out there with my camera, giggling, laughing, having the best time in the world. Saw this guy with an umbrella. I thought, well, that's what I need. Just get that figure in there. But I loved it, and I love it. I love winters. But the transition from winter to summer means open ice, and that's what I call this. Open ice on the Delaware Canal. Now, the one who could figure out the name of my friend's sculptor, can you figure out the name of this painting that I called Open Water in the Delaware Canal? The one who bought it does not call it that. She calls it my vagina painting. lady, you're going to give me money, you can call it whatever you want. And back to palette knife, which I don't do as much anymore, but I do love palette knife. You know, it's really like making 16 strokes on your canvas with only one swipe of the knife. And you can have some great effects. Also, every once in a while I'll read something and I'll put it up on my wall. Don't hesitate to exaggerate. Ty, you're so good at that. And William Merritt Chase, so that's not a bad guy to quote. So this is my studio. It was once the living room in our little home, but I've usurped it. So our kitchen is now our kitchen, dining room, living room, and Shirley's knitting box. No, she's not a knitting box anymore. So this is my studio, and as you can see, I can be very, very prolific. I love painting, and because as a plein air painter, I used to be, I'm not anymore, you know, if you could paint in 3 hours, if you don't paint in 3 hours, it's changed. This was one of my favorite assignments, to paint something of Prohlsville Mill. And I love the mill. I love the color in this shot, which are exaggerated through my iPhoto. But I love the color, but it just had too much detail. And I said, it's not going to work, too much detail. So I took out some of the detail. And this got an award and sold at Phillips Mill also. And that's what I'm struggling to do. I'm struggling to, as the famous sculptor said, you know, I saw the angel in the stone and carved to set it free. I think we see something and we have to carve it. We have to carve away what's not necessary. Or we have to in some way radically change it, shift it. I love the relationship with these two barns, and it became a painting I call Father and Son. Now you can see there's not too much relationship beside the fundamental shape between those two. But that was what I was caught with, was the shape. And then I realized that I didn't want to be tyrannized by it. And I grabbed my brush and I painted this shadow in there. I haven't a clue whether any shadow like that could ever exist in life, but it worked for me. And I realized that that's what I need to do. I need to ask, what does the painting need? Not do I want to do with it. What does the painting need to be stronger, to make a better statement, to emphasize what you really think is important in your work? In this case, I'm back to you, Ty. See, you really, that was that 50 bucks I paid you, whatever the hell it was. That was worth it. This barn was an old gray barn, had no color at all, but I loved again the shape of it. It was the essence of it was the shape, and then I wanted to give it a character of a character of life, not of age. And so I started with my blues, which I love, and put some greens on it, which I love, and then some purples, and then a little warm color. So it's my version of an old brown barn. Then I saw this barn. I love the way the morning light. Hey, I'm talking. Sheesh. What kind of a place is it? No courtesy. Anyhow, I love the way the morning light was hitting these barns. But my wife doesn't like me painting too much blue. She thinks I'm too much blue. So I have to try and rethink things when they are blue. But this one was certainly blue, and I could have painted it this way, and it might have been an okay painting, but I painted it this way instead. I gave the shadows, you know, I try to give shadows the dimension that they have. Since I can't give it the 3 dimensions, I only have 2 dimensions. I try to give it dimensionality through the shifting of colors, the shifting of values, and that's what that one was really about. And it's called Morning Light. And this is actually from a photograph of 2 old sheep barns in California. Once again, boy, I'm doing a lot of palette knife stuff. This is giving Ty Hordonis too much credit. I've got to reorganize this presentation. But once again, what the palette knife gives to me, and then you can see it's not all palette knife. These are brush strokes up here and here. But what the palette knife gives me is that kind of crusty texture, And these are old buildings, and I didn't want them to look old and dreary, but I wanted them to look old and textured. So that was palette knife from that. And this was my most successful painting of Lambertville, successful because I got a lot of money for it. And it was that one night, I'm in it, it's in winter or early spring maybe, I don't remember. But there was this one woman walking across the street, and I thought, that's it. That's what makes the painting. Now, Cezanne and I, see, I love to connect myself with people like that. Cezanne and I don't look to put a lot of people in our paintings. Of course, he paints a lot of people, which I don't like. But he'll put an occasional duck in a painting. But mostly his landscapes are just landscapes. But somehow or other, that little woman walking across the street made the painting for me. Without her, so you're constantly asking yourself, what's essential and what's not essential? Because if something is not essential, you should get rid of it. And then occasionally I will do something like this. This is my attempt to create a quality of a place, to imply a quality of a place, not to describe the place. And so I call this, what do I call this? It's got a wonderful name. And you know what? I think that brain cell may have died. But let's check. No, it's called Geometry for a Small City. And it is painted in Lambertville. And another one which is called Heart of a Rose. It is literally the heart of a rose. This was one of my early ones here in Lambertville. We went to the shore, and there was this little chair sitting there all by itself with a book right next to it and no person. And I just love the mood that was created. It's a little more literal than I would paint today, but again, what was it about? It was about the kind of isolation, loneliness of a chair sitting on the beach. And sometimes it's just a little bridge. Just a little bridge over the canal. And sometimes it's a powerful line of trees that leads to an unlikely little spot of green. I love little spots, little pieces in a film, in a film too, in a painting that kind of give you a reward for taking that long trip down the road. And I love paintings that can say something more than what they literally are. This is literally a bunch of clothes on a line. I call it Sign of Spring. And this was a funky bunch of flowers that I got from the supermarket and stuck them in this vase and called it Even the Ordinary Can Be Beautiful. And that's what I try to find. I try to find the beauty in the ordinary. This is not a very spectacular building. It's not a very spectacular array of flowers. But to me, it was spectacular. So the use of color, the use of texture to get what I think it stood for. And then every once in a while, I'll really get carried away and paint a painting that doesn't really look anything like what the subject looked like. This is called Along the Canal. And it's my attempt to give a feeling of what it's like to walk on that canal when it's spring. And it's all kind of so warm and inviting and easy to walk on. So that's my view of spring along the canal, along the towpath rather. It's not what you see, but what you enable others to see. As you've heard from what I've been saying, that's my goal. I'm trying to help people to enjoy what they see, to see worlds they've never seen before. I was doing a film with Thich Nhat Hanh. So he's a Buddhist monk, and we're doing a little film with him, and I say to him, show me something in a way I've never seen it before. So he picks up this apple, and he says, what do you see? You know, I'm swift, so I get it right away. I say, see an apple, you know, quick. No, he said, I see the sky and the rain and the ground. That's what I see. I have never looked at an apple the same again. And that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that what I do in my films and what I do in my art will help others to see something in a way they've never seen it before. I do take pleasure in my film work, even though it's sometimes painful and frustrating, but it's mostly fun. And this was one of the funnest shoots at Pixar. I was surrounded by all these people who just never said anything, which was so nice, and a wonderful cameraman, whose name I proceeded to have forgotten. So sometimes I use cameramen, most of the times I shoot my own, but now I have this wonderful cameraman in the back, Jack Ballo, who is also a semi-saint in my view. He's done a wonderful film called Destiny's Bridge. We worked on it together. He did 99%, but you know, I'm the 1%, and in our society, the 1% is the most important, right? You all know that. Good, I just wanted to make sure you understood. We did a show together with, I love working with somebody else. To me, collaboration is not only a delight, but it's the only way to live your life. I really think that it's no accident that we call marriage a joining of two people. So this, and Jack and I worked together. In this case, it was Jason Cohn. We did Eames together. He brought the idea to me, but we did the film together. It got a Peabody Award, which is, of course, nice. And I got a chance to direct this young fellow. Who knows his name? James Franco. I thought you all would know that. What do we have, a bunch of old people in this audience? And James was funny. He's a movie star, you know. So I think he wanted me to know that. So we sit down, he does one run through with the script. And I say, well, you know, that's good, James. I really like that, but I think there's a few things I'd like to change. He says, you know what I could do when you hired me. I said, oh, I see. But in spite of his apparent reluctance to be nice to me, we got along fine. He did a wonderful job of narrating the Eames show. And on that night, that Colbert got his second Peabody Award. You can see, this is what Jersey got. Well, he put a little thing there, right? Me too, huh? You know, I'm modest, but so it was really cute because, of course, the press, the hundreds and hundreds of reporters and cameramen and videographers were all filming Colbert, and I think nobody saw me. No, that's not true. Rise and Fall of Jim Crow was our other Peabody Award winner, which I did with Richard Wormser, and which is tragically relevant today. There's Richard and I. And this is our latest. We always do films that everybody wants to see, you know. Rise and Fall of Jim Crow, Communist Party, yeah. But hopefully it's going to be shown on public television. And we did not try to, although I think Richard would have liked to make this a celebration of how wonderful the Communist Party. It's really more a tragedy of people who really wanted to do good, who really did a lot of good in creating and supporting unions and in getting health care and so forth. But they believed in the Soviet, they believed in the crazy Stalin, and thought that America should become an equivalent of the Soviet Union, which of course was goofy. So that's how the film ends. It ends with a well-intentioned bunch of folks who tried to do something good but got hooked up with the wrong people to follow. And so I'm back to painting, and thanks to Artsbridge and the River Rats, I go to wonderful places. But by the same token, I also have to travel once in a while because my wife doesn't want to stay home all the time. So I take her to Italy, and I see for the first time in my life poppies with olive trees. I'd never seen this before because we'd never gone in the spring. And I just couldn't believe the relationship with poppies and olive trees. And that was sold. It was shown at the bank across the street, and was sold. And now I'm painting water. I love water, and so I'm painting all kinds of water. And that painting is right behind me here, as you can see. It's called Spring Runoff on River Road, because it is in fact spring runoff on River Road. That's not a big waterfall. That's a small waterfall that is seasonal. In the dry season, there's nothing but rocks. And in the spring, or whenever it's heavy rains, so I call it spring runoff. And to me, in a way, it represents the life as I experience it. It is beauty and chaos, consistent with one another, living with one another, appreciating one another. I love the chaos in my life. I love the beauty in my life. And this is my advice to all of you. Why art? Because you'll never have to change batteries or remember passwords or read directions or fear obsolescence. So if those of you who have not bought a painting of one of the ones you see here tonight, do not leave without buying a painting. And you can make some people happy. The woman who bought that painting at Phillips Mill was very, very happy, as have been many others, and sent me nice. It's wonderful to get cards from people who like your work. But in a way, my favorite story is of a young man who worked for me, a very capable guy, on a film. And he said to me at the end of the film, he said, you know, I've never done as good work for anyone. I've never done as good work for anyone as I have done for you. To enable somebody to do better work than they've done before, to me, that's what life is about. Helping one another to do our best work, to live our best lives. And if you have to go back to the Colonial Theater where you did the Blob in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, every year to feel good about yourself, well, Jers, go for it. Thank you very much.